art sort of melts those walls down and those barriers down. I think for the longest time in the history of Africa, art has been a way to connect people to the land, to their history, and a lot of our trauma as Africans is sort of looked at as something that is in the past. But because we don't have a tradition of recording our history in books and in libraries where you find these references of our experiences, art has always been a way to connect to that history. And art, in a sense, has a way of trying to reconcile the past as a way of trying to heal people in the present. I think in the history of South Africa in particular, is that we have this moment of going through the apartheid regime, which follows on from colonialism. But in 1994, we had our first democratic election. And that moment is marked as South Africa's transition from this traumatic history into a new country. But in most cases, that's just a political event in that the lives of people, to a large extent, have not changed. Are living in the post-colonial era, but we're dealing a lot with the legacy of those things. So the way people live, the languages that people speak, where people work, all of those things are still very much determined by the history that we just come from. It's quite difficult as a South African to sort of be hopeful about the future when you know that a lot of the traumas that were created during colonialism and apartheid are still very much the reality for a lot of people. Most artists tend to be forward-looking, to try and imagine what the future might look like. But for you to be able to do that, in most cases, you have to neglect the reality of poverty, of unemployment, of all these things. Art allows you to sort of engage that history so that when you move forward, you pick up the lessons and sort of improve the social condition as you move forward. I've realized that a lot of that trauma traps people in a cycle where you don't see a way forward. I've just recently become a father, and now thinking more about my daughter's life and what that might look like, it encourages me to want to make her life better than my life and my parents' life. Looking ahead through my daughter's eyes is what gives me hope. I was blessed to find myself working as an artist because in that space I'm able to sort of understand my own situation and that of others, and you are able to exist not just as a black person or as a male or something, it's just as a human being. In my work, the question of well-being comes from the kind of projections that are made. I deal a lot with the trauma and the violence of South Africa, but I'm always trying to see how it affects me or how it changes me to be a better person or a better version of myself in a way. So I use my work as a way of imparting these lessons that I've learned in my personal life, but sort of try to relate them in a way that they make sense for the collective history or the collective experience of people. I think the performance that I'm presenting is about healing. It makes reference to a tradition in South Africa of it's called ubungoma. Ubungoma is a tradition of healing, where there's people that would have a calling and they would be initiated to becoming healers, and they would then go back into their communities and help people. So sangoma can help with fertility issues, can help with past traumas. It can help with sort of getting your life in order. So I'm hoping that more artists find a way to anchor their work in these traditions of healing, which go back a long way in South Africa, or in Africa in general. Sort of a way of trying to navigate this difficult path that colonialism has set. There's a way to transgress all of that and go back to the past and try to figure out how people were living and how they were dealing with these challenges, and then bring that into the work. And by being able to share the work, these lessons are spread across the world. Part of the damage of colonialism is that it separates people from their land. And when you do that, you separate people from their sacred places, burial sites, significant places in the land that give us our identity as African people. So that connection for me is very important. So in a history like South Africa, where sort of 80% of the population is living in these reserves, labor reserves called blank townships, means that there's a disconnect between the body and the land. And if the body and the land are not in sync, that means you're not in sync with your own identity and with your history. So in my work, I try to make reference to the land in a way, so that the body is always an extension of the environment and the history. I got into visual art when I was probably 18 or so, because there was no formal training at school. And I felt like that was a bit too late. So part of my personal goal is to find a way to teach so that younger people are able to access art from an early stage. So I think art education at a very early stage in impoverished communities could be a way to sort of break the cycle of poverty and trauma.